So we're going to start today by talking about internal structure, the internal structure of a poem. So by internal structure in a poem, basically we mean the organization of ideas of that poem. That can include a shift in the subject matter, a change of the topic, a change in the tone, a change in the mode of address, so going from imperative, for example, to questions or something, the change in verb tense, so maybe they're going to talk about what was and then what is, or maybe a shift in mode, so maybe they're going to be narrating at first and then reflecting, or maybe there's going to be a period of description or something like that that's different. Those are all ways that the internal structure can differ. Now, keep in mind that internal structure sometimes does match up with external structure, so the author shifts what they're doing between stanzas. So we have one stanza of describing and then one stanza of reflecting or something like that. Or one stanza describing the past and then one stanza describing the present. But not always. Sometimes the internal structure may shift in the middle of a stanza, in the middle of a line, so it may not always add up together or line up together. A good example for shifting in internal structure is the sonnet, because sonnets often contain a turn in the last couplet. So here are a couple examples from Shakespeare. If you look at the sonnet, My Mistress' Eyes Are Nothing Like the Sun, very well known, he spends the first 12 lines describing this woman and comparing her to various things. And sort of the irony in this example is that most of the time poets are comparing the woman favorably to these things. Her eyes are brighter than the sun. Her lips are as red as coral. But Shakespeare's saying, no, her eyes are not like the sun, her lips are not as red as coral. But then he turns it around in the last two lines. And yet by heaven I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. So then in these last two lines, he's reflecting on what he said, even though she does not more beautiful than these natural items, I still love her just as much as people who lie about how pretty their women are. So he has changed from his description here to reflection. And that kind of matches up with the external structure in that it does start on a new line, and it is that ending couplet that contains that turn. But there is not usually, in sonnets, there's not usually a stanza division there. Here's another Shakespeare sonnet, That time of year thou mayst in me behold. So if you look at the first 12 lines of this sonnet, he's using various metaphors to talk about how he's aging. He compares himself to a tree losing its leaves, twilight, the dying of day, the dying of a fire, those things. But then at the end he turns around and says, This thou perceiv'st which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. So basically, you have noticed that I'm aging, but you love me more because you know that I'm not going to be here forever. So he's turned around and reflected on his description from earlier in the poem. So that's also a change in internal structure. I like to use In a Prominent Bar in Secaucus One Day too, because this poem shows us an interesting thing about shifting in structure. So if you remember this from earlier in the semester, we have the woman earlier describing her previous life, and we have some shifts. So we have the first and last stanza, which are separate because they are not the woman speaking, they are a patron in the bar speaking. So we have a corresponding shift in external form where we have a stanza break after the first stanza and before the last stanza, and a shift in internal structure where we have a change in speaker. But we also have a shift in internal structure in the middle here. So you see these 4 stanzas here on the left, and the top stanza on the right, and half of the second stanza on the right. Those all are part of one kind of discussion, which is her description of her past life. And she uses all of this figurative language to describe her past life. Now notice in the middle of that stanza here, she changes what she's doing. She starts, when the horses bound down to me that I might choose, I bet on them all for I hated to lose, which is her description of her past life. But when she starts with the word now, she shifts. Now I'm saddled each night for my butter and eggs, and the broken threads race down the back of my legs. So this is an interesting shift because she uses the same two ideas, right? Horses racing. So she compares herself to the horses. She's the one being saddled, and the broken veins on her legs are racing like the horses. So she's putting herself in the horse's place. But this is a shift in internal structure because she's shifting from here's how things were to how they are now. And of course, how they are now is very negative compared to how they were. So that's a good example of a shift in internal structure that does not match up with the external form. Whereas these two paragraphs stanzas at the beginning and end are correspondingly both shifts in internal structure and external form.